Today's tutorial will be a demonstration on one of many procedures in which we can start modeling. And I'm sure that many of you have been drawing and sketching your designs, and it'd be really useful to actually use those sketches and bring them into Rhino as a reference in order to start creating your forms and masses. So I have made a sketch of what we are going to build in this tutorial. It's a mushroom building. And so I've labeled it and broken it down into simple forms so it becomes easier to think about when modeling, and I don't have to do it all at once. I could go form by form. So I have my mushroom cap with several openings and a stem, which also has an opening as an entrance, and some landscaping components. In addition to that, I have some orthographic drawings, a plan of the roof plus different site elements, and another plan cut at a lower portion. So it's giving us the profiles of our stem. And lastly, an elevation. So with these three drawings, I can help guide how I'm going to create my forms in Rhino. So with our Rhino space open or Rhino file open, the first command we'll do is picture, and that's available in our surface tab at the top under plane and picture, or you can similarly type that out in the command bar. Now we're brought into our folders and we can decide what images we'd like to bring in. Supportive file formats are raster images, and in this case, I'll choose JPEG, and I'll bring in this reference image for the mushroom exercise. So in our command prompt, it's asking us to select our first corner, and alongside this, this first action, we have some other options in parentheses. So if you want to make this picture vertical, just select this and that'll reroute the command options or action. In this case, none of these options really apply. So I'll select my first corner by clicking or inputting a coordinate. So I'm placing it at origin. And then from here, scale doesn't matter because we're going to adjust it again anyhow. So I'll select there. And I'll head into my top view. So I have provided some key dimensions that we can try to scale this reference image to now. So I'll create a line, and it doesn't really matter where we start, but I'll click at one of the ends of the dimension. And my second click, I'll have to type in 150. So we know now that this line is 150 units. In this case, my project file is in millimeters, so this is 150 millimeters. And I'll click it to execute that command. So this line is 150, and we're trying to match our key dimension that we've drawn to this line so that we know our drawing is scaled. So I will type in scale, and where this line begins, I'll have my first selection. Where this other end of the dimension is, I'll click and then try to match it to the extent of this line. So now we're sure that this circle that we've drawn is approximately 150 units. And from now on, we can either use this drawing and replicate our profiles and forms to the drawing, or use it as a guide or template, but create our profiles and forms using exact dimensions. I have it in top view, so we have it in plan, but because I do have an elevation drawing, it'd be useful to include another copy in an elevation. So in our front view would be very useful. How I could do that is I'll first copy my reference image. So I could type copy in the command bar. And with every command, there will be some options that you could select before executing the next step within parentheses. So I have the option to make it vertical, or I can copy in place. So I want to select in place, and now a copy has been made. You'll know a copy is made because when I select my reference image, because they're superimposed, Rhino is having difficulty selecting them. So here we can use the selection menu to determine which one we'll select. I have my gumball snap at the bottom activated, which if I didn't have it, doesn't have this unique tool. What we can do with this gumball tool is several translations. So we can move it, we can rotate it, we can stretch it. In this case, I want to rotate my reference image. So using these curved grips, I'm going to take this red curved line. And if you have ortho, it'll be locking onto your 90-degree 90-degree of references. So I'll click and drag, and now I have my reference image visible in our front view. We'll do a bit of tweaking or moving so that this reference images kind of align to our plane. So you can see in this square grid with a green line and a red line, that's our origin point and defines our workspace planes. So I'll want to match this datum of the ground plane to this red line. So I could use my gumball to do this, like that. Okay, so once that is complete, I'll give you like a few seconds. Then we'll head back to our layers panel and start defining what parts of this model we want to kind of deconstruct and put into their own layers. So I had mentioned with the sketch that we have sort of the top part, which is the cap. We have the stem, and we have openings. So I'll probably make 3 different categories for those. We'll select 3 different, create 3 new layers and rename them. So in this case, I'll do mushroom cap. Double click, mushroom stem, and openings. Okay, so someone is asking how do we scale? So what I did was I selected the reference image, and we had that line, which was 150 units. And what I did was I tried to scale this key dimension to the length of this line, which we already know is 150, so that 150 on the drawing will match 150 in the model space. Type scale in the command prompt, and we'll be selecting the extents of our key dimension. So one end, the other end, and we want to match it with the length of this line. So it'll be useful if you have the line directly over top so that you could snap onto the end of the line. Okay, going back now to our layers organization. What's useful for me when I model is to have 2 sublayers, one for construction lines, which we use as like our scaffolding to create the actual form, and then another sublayer for the final form. So the second button, we can create a new sublayer beneath a layer that's highlighted. So I'll create a sublayer for my mushroom cap. And if I want to create a second one, I have to reselect the parent layer and then create the sublayer. So we'll do that for the 3 categories that we've created. And under each, I will create construction lines and a final form sublayer. So yeah, we'll go through this together. Final form, construction layers, final form. And as you're doing that,
can you explain what the little icons are next to the layers? The unlocked, locked,
yeah.
Light bulb, etc.
So to begin, whatever title is bolded and has a check mark is the active layer. So any new objects will be created within that layer. So if I want to create something for my mushroom cap, I'll have to select that layer by double clicking. You can hide your layers. So if you are working on your mushroom cap, for example, and don't want these shown, you can select the light bulb and you'll know it's turned off because it's blue. And so those objects within those layers are not shown. You can also lock them, meaning that if they are visible, they're not selectable, and then you don't have to worry about them being affected when you're modeling. Another thing is you can apply colors to layers so that the objects present in that color. So we'll do that now so we can identify these parts of our models very easily. I've selected my parent layer, held shift, and selected the last layer. So I can right click, go to set properties, and we can choose our color from there. Color. And for each, I'm going to apply a different color. So I've hold shift and you could select one by one, or you could select the full list and then right click, set properties and color. And another one for the openings. Something like blue. Okay, so now we have a really robust framework in which we can start modeling into. All right, I will start with the cap. So I'm gonna have my construction lines activated. And in this case, if I look back to the image, it's a circular form, it's a radial form. So I can probably take a profile of this mushroom, like cut into a section, and use that profile to revolve around its center point, and then our form will be created. So I think the best place to start would be in our front viewport, which has our elevation view of our mushroom. So what I could do is I could create a line that defines our like center line, and oh, it's disappeared. So one thing we should do is move our reference image in the elevation view so that it's a little beyond the location of where our lines will be produced. And we'll know where our lines are produced through that grid, the origin square that we saw. So I'm gonna hide these reference images just to show you. Our objects will be placed onto the XZ plane when we're in our front view. And so we'll want these reference images just behind it so that we can see both our elements and also the reference image. I'll head back to our front view. And now that I've defined my center line axis, I can go about tracing this image that we've created or drawn. There's two freeform curve options that you can select from, either control points or interpolate points. You can find this in the curve section, curve tab at the top, and freeform. So one of these two would work for tracing this image. I'll go with interpolate points, mostly because every time I anchor my points, the curve will intersect those points. So as you can see, no matter how I decide to angle my curve, the points will lock it into this string of points. And right now I have ortho on, so if you have difficulty selecting it, you might want to deselect it, or you can hold shift and that'll toggle it on and off. So I'm just pressing shift and you can see it's toggling on and off. So I'll let you guys go ahead and trace this mushroom profile. And when you're at a place where it's a lot more angled, then you'll want to place more control points versus where it's kind of steeper angles. And in this case, we only really need half of the profile to revolve around this axis. So once I'm done, I could click enter to accept this curve. Now we'll head to our perspective view just to see what this object will look like. And now that we've drawn our construction curves, I'll want to switch to a different layer, which is our final form. And this command that we'll do is called revolve. Revolve. Yep, so in bolded at the top are the instructions. It's asking us to select curves to revolve. I want to select this curve that I've just drawn and hit enter. And then now we'll define our axis, which we've drawn here. And it doesn't really matter like if it matches with the extents of these curves, it's just looking for an axis. And now we can define how much we are revolving our curve. In this case, we want it a full 360 degrees. So we don't really need to input a value. We can go to one of these options in parentheses and choose full circle. And now we have our profile rotated around the center axis to create the solid object now. And it's a little bit hard to decipher what it looks like because we're in wireframe mode. So if you wanted to see the actual surface, we can drop down this menu at our viewport corner at the top left and select one of these display options. And I like to—
Before you do that, can you go back? Some students are asking you to do that again. If you can.
Okay, yeah, no worries. So I'll delete this and I'll type in the revolve command to start it, and it's asking for the curves that we want to select. So I'm selecting the curve that we want to rotate around this center axis. Then we'll hit enter, prompting us for the next step, which is to define our revolve axis. And we've drawn that line in the front view here. So I could do the command in this view as well. And now that I've defined my axis, it's now asking for a value for the angle in which we will create a form. So I could type in 90 and I'll get a quarter of a turn, quarter of a circle turn, and that'll be my shape. But in this case, I want a full rotation. So we could do full circle, or you could type 360. And that should produce our object now. And as I stated, it's not the most easiest to decipher by looking at it. So we could go to this drop-down menu and choose one of these viewport display options. And I usually choose shaded or ghosted. So I'll show you ghosted, and you could see that now the surface is visible, but we could also kind of see through it and look at what's past or beyond the surface. Versus shaded, it'll be opaque, and so it's easier to understand this object, but then we also can't determine what's beyond or beneath it. And if I were to select this and look at the bottom bar, we'll see that our form has been placed into mushroom cap and final form, which is what we want, which is the active layer. Everything's good so far. Does anybody have any questions?
Eric, one question. When you're creating a curve, if you placed one point like in some wrong location accidentally, can you just delete this point, or you need to start all over again?
When you're doing the command, that's what you're saying?
When you're creating a curve, like by points.
By point, and then
when you're drawing, you're tracing.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So if I were to grab that, yeah, say you don't like where this is placed, you can Control Z, and it'll revert one of the points or anchors that you've placed, and then you can replace it. So Control Z.
Thank you.
Okay, and somebody asked to do it again. Okay, yep. So revolve, select the curve, enter, and define the axis of rotation, and then we'll choose full circle. So we're back here again. All right, now I'll move on to my openings. And in this case, I'll be concerned with the top view because we're looking at plan. So I'll head to top view. And of course, we should align our drawing with our model. And so I'll unlock, oh yeah, reference images are already unlocked, and I can use the grips of our gumball to align our drawing with our model object. It's a little bit off, so I'm gonna move it a little in the X direction too. So once you're satisfied with where your reference image is located to the object, we can lock it so that it doesn't get in the way. And now we'll create these profiles in which become our openings for our mushroom roof. And so one way we could do this is using these profiles, use it like a cookie cutter almost, and have them cut through or take a piece out of this solid object. So I'll go through a few steps of how to do this. First thing maybe is to go to our openings layers and select the construction lines layer so that any new model object will be placed into here. We can hide this for now. So we can go to our light bulb for this whole parent layer and then turn it off. Now it's gone. It's still in the workspace, but it's not visible. What I'll do is create a circle profile to match this. So I could type circle in the command bar, or I could go to curves and choose circle. And we'll do center and radius. So we're defining where the center is, approximate it to the drawing. Click, and then now defining the radius our second click will be that. And as I mentioned before, our curve, or wherever we're drawing a curve or a model or an object, it's going to be placed onto the work plane that you're currently in. So I'm in top view, is going to be placed on our X, Y work plane, which is not exactly what we want. We want it to be applied to the elevation which our mushroom cap is. So before we get to that, we'll create the rest of the circles. So you can draw them out individually, or you can copy them and place them on top. But I want to show you array polar command. So array, if I type it in, has a bunch of different options. And so they have, oh, what is array? Array is basically copying an element and repeating it. So I can copy it in a linear direction. So I could specify a direction and copy it however many times I want. I could array it along a curve. So I could define a curve and copy this circle element in the direction of that curve. But in this case, we want to use array polar, which means that we're going to copy this object around a center point, which is basically how these circles have been organized around a center point, basically. So I'm going to use array polar. And without this selected, first, I'll type array polar. It's going to ask us for the objects in which we want to copy. I've made this circle already, so that's what I will select to define that object. And then we could hit enter. And now it's asking for the center point, which right now, I don't really have a reference point to select. So what we could do is unhide this mushroom cap layer to reveal this geometry we've already created and use its datum to snap to the center point. So once that's visible, I can select this center point, and now that becomes our center of rotation. And I'll hide it again, so it's not needed. The next step is to determine the number of items. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll choose 6, enter. And because we want this to be, again, a full rotation, our angle will remain as 360. And you can see in the bolded that it's default, or you can type in the angle in which we want to create. So 360 is fine. I'll hit enter. It'll preview the forms or the shapes around the center. And I'm happy with that. And we'll click OK. And now we've got our copies. And as you can see, my drawing is a little inaccurate. It doesn't follow exactly what our array polar command did, but I'd rather stick with the accuracy of this Rhino command versus my drawing. So we'll continue in that sense. As I mentioned, it's all on the XY plane, whereas we want these curves to be applied to this Z elevation for our mushroom cap. So one way we could do this is project these curves onto the surface above. What does project mean? Just think of a projector. You're taking an image and applying it onto another object. So in Rhino terms, we want to project this curve onto the surface. I'll move into my top view because, again, it's like a cookie cutter. Whatever this profile is, looks like in whatever this profile looks like in this view is how it will be applied to our object, our object. So I will type in the project command. And it's asking me to select my curves. So I'm going to select all the circles that I've just created. Enter. And now I'm going to select the object that I want to project it onto and hit apply. And when we go into perspective mode, you'll see that our curves have been applied to our surface. But you'll notice that it's on both the top surface and also the bottom. So We'll only be concerned with the top curves for now. Construction lines, okay. And now we can use these curves to cut into our surface. One way, there's multiple ways to do this. There's many ways to do one thing in Rhino, but I'll just show you the split command. So we're splitting this surface based off curve geometries we placed onto it. So Rhino's asking me to select the object I want to split. I want to split the surface. So I'll select that. And then I want to select the objects that are cutting it, which are my curves here. And I'll press enter to execute the command. And it doesn't look like anything has changed, but when you select the surface, it's been broken up now. And I can delete these and reveal or create my openings for this object. And you could see that now it has an interior, and from there you could create your spaces and programs within your building. I want to apply sort of a frame or border, solid border around these openings. One way I could do that is using these curves that have already been generated and applying a circular thickness to it using the pipe command. So I'll type in pipe and select the rail or select the profile that we want to apply the thickness to. And then now it's asking for the radius of our pipe, which I'll keep it at 1 right now. And you could see that you could select it manually by adjusting it with your cursor, but I'll use an accurate value. So I'll keep 1 and then hit enter and hit enter again. And now I have a radius, a circular radius applied to my curve, and now it's a solid object. If you don't happen to have the curve, say those were accidentally deleted and you're just left with the surface, there's a command in order to retrieve this edge from it, which is duplicate, but it's short form to DUP. And like the array command, it has several options that you could choose from. You can duplicate a border, you can duplicate a layer, or you could duplicate, in our case, an edge. So the command is dup edge. And Rhino is asking for the edge, so I'll select it and hit enter, and now we've got our curve again from this surface. Okay, so for the pipe command, I'm taking my curve and applying a circular radius to it. Yeah, think of it like a necklace, and then you're giving it a thickness to this curve. So I'll type my pipe command, select the rail, and that's just another word for the curve that we're using. And now it's asking for a radius, so I can manually adjust it with my cursor and click to select, or I could input a value, which by default in bolded, it's at 1. So I could type 2 and my radius here is previewed. Here, if I made it 3, it's a bit larger. And once I'm happy with the radius, I can hit enter and enter again if I'm not creating a new radius. So let's go ahead and apply a frame to all of these curves, keeping in mind that I'm going to change my layer so that it's in my final form. So pipe command, I'll select, or I could select them all first. Select, Okay, and then apply the pipe command. And we'll keep a radius at like 1. Enter. And there we have our border or frame for this model. All right, does anyone have any questions so far? Nope. Okay, we'll move on. Now that we're basically done with our roof of our model, we'll look to this support structure. And so it's a little bit of a weird geometry. This is going to be a bit different. I'm going to keep this as a circular geometry, but you could see that the base is a bit larger than the top portion, and it's sort of angling to the side. So I want to use this second plan that I've drawn, which indicates the different profiles of this stem. And you'll see that numbers are associated to it, which we can see in our elevation or section. And what we'll do is we'll create these profiles and place them at the correct Z elevation so that when we do the loft command, our loft command will take these profiles and generate a surface from them. Let me see. How do I multi-select openings? So if you want to select multiple items, you can hold Shift and go ahead and select whatever objects you'd like. And if you want to remove an object or an element from a selection, hold Control as you're doing that. So I'm deselecting right now, and then now I'm holding Shift and selecting multiple objects. Okay. So I need to adjust my reference image again. I'll unlock it and select it and move it so that it's roughly below our model object. I'm heading into the top view and then using my gumball supports, remember at the bottom, to drag this arrow so that it's approximately underneath my model, just like that. Okay, great. And then once you're happy with its location, again, we'll lock it so that it doesn't become a nuisance or get in the way of our commands. I'm going to move into our construction lines sublayer in the mushroom stem. And then from here, I could hide some of these objects so that they're not in the way as well. I will create a circle. So we can go to our curves tab at the top, circle, and then do the same two-step process. Define the center of our circle and then create the radius. And then we'll zoom in a little more to do the other steps, other circles. So just like that. And one more, and we have our 3 profiles. As I've mentioned with the previous steps, our curves are going to be placed on the XY plane, and we have to move them up to their associated level. So our level 1 curve, I'm going to make a copy actually, so that we have at least a profile to start off with on the base. So I'm going to copy it, and again, hit in place so that you make a duplicate right on top, so they're superimposed. I'm going to minimize my viewports so that I could see multiple views at the same time, and I will zoom in to my front and my perspective so that I could see them simultaneously. I'll select one of my curves, and because this is labeled 1, I want to adjust it so that it's alongside the same elevation as in our drawing. Now I could take my second curve. Now that it's selected, I'll move to my front viewport, and again, using the gumball, move it up a specific amount until there. And then last curve, which is our third curve, I'll move that up in the front viewport and align it with our third section. So I have my base curve. I have my 3 profiles that I've, I guess, determined through these section cuts. And we'll probably want another curve that's placed onto the surface of our mushroom roof. So what I could do is unhide it, and we'll go back to our project command. So we could project that curve onto the base of our mushroom and consequently the top, but we're only concerned with it being applied to the base. So I'll select this third curve, and now that I see it in the top view, I'll type in the project command. And because this has already been selected before the command was executed, I just need to select the surface, which it will be applied to. And you can see that it's now placed onto the bottom and the top of our mushroom surface. Right, now that we have all our profiles created and in their respective locations, I will use the loft command. And what loft does, it'll create a surface using these profiles and mold it basically to them. So what's important about loft is that it's order dependent. So make sure that you're selecting them in order from top to bottom or bottom to top and roughly in the same location. And I'll explain why. So I've selected all 5 of my curves and I'll hit enter and we'll have this adjustment, I guess, action in which is determining like the path of which the surface will conform to these profiles. So right now, like they're okay, it's pretty much in line. But if you're, for example, your scene's adjustment curve was something like this, then you'll get something a little wonky or funky, and we'll want to have them as aligned as possible. So you can select one of these control points and move them around the curve, and then click again to establish its location. So right now I'm fine with this, and I could hit enter to execute the loft. We're brought into this new dialog box, which I won't explain too much. You can investigate yourself, but we have different styles based on how it will conform, our surface will conform to these profiles. So we can have them stick really rigidly, or we could have it a little bit looser so it's not conforming too much to it, but it's having the surface like really blend well with each other. And there's some options like you could close this loft and becomes a solid object as opposed to a surface. But right now I want to keep it as this this surface of the stem. So I'm okay with this and hit okay to apply it. I'll want to switch this to my final form. Actually, no. Let's give this surface some thickness. So I'll hide this mushroom cap so it's out of the way. You'll see that it doesn't have a thickness. It's just paper thin. And if you're creating your building, obviously there's thickness to your walls. So one way we could apply a thickness to a surface is by, what is the command actually? Offset surface. So we're offsetting the surface a certain dimension inward or outward from its original location. So I want to select offset surface. And right now, what I'll explain right now is just how to create a distance from the surface. So again, in parentheses, we have different options in this command, and we could select distance to insert a value we want to offset this surface. So I'm going to type maybe 2, and we'll see what that looks like. And select object to flip direction. So I could click this to determine whether my offset is going to be on the outside or the inside of this surface. So using the arrows visually determine which one is which. So I'll offset it inside. And now we've applied a thickness to our surface. Right now, as you can see at the bottom, it's at construction lines, which I don't want it to be. I want it to be in my final form layer. So there's a few ways to change an object into a different layer. I could select this, drop down, drop up menu and choose the layer that we want. But that's only if these layers have been created. If you want to create a new layer in which the object will be applied to, the command we can type in is change layer. And we'll select this object. And it'll be the same format as what we've seen here in our layers panel, but also here in the drop down menu, except now we have the option to create a new one. So in that case, you can create a new one within this dialog and place it into what was created.